Welcome to the Clarity Podcast. In a world that often feels overwhelmingly solid, fixed, and permanent, we're going to explore one of Buddhism's most profound and liberating teachings, the concept of emptiness. I believe this ancient wisdom holds the key to understanding why we suffer, or more importantly, how we can be free. So, settle in, open your mind, and let's see what happens when we look beyond the surface of things.
So today we're tackling a word that, let's be honest, for a lot of people, I think it brings up ideas of a void, maybe a blank space, even just nothingness. It doesn't quite have the warm, fuzzy feel of words like bliss or love, does it?
It really doesn't. And it is, a bit of an odd choice, you might think, for a central idea in a major world religion's philosophy. Who's going to sign up for a path that sounds so empty?
Right. But what if we told you that this emptiness, specifically the Buddhist concept, sunyata, isn't bleak at all, that it's actually profoundly liberating, a kind of gateway to incredible freedom and maybe surprisingly a deeper connection to everything.
That is exactly what we're aiming to explore today. We're doing a deep dive into sunyata. We want to unpack where it came from, what its real purpose is, and then, go step by step into deeper ways of understanding it.
Okay, let's unpack this right away then, that first hurdle. When we hear emptiness, our minds often jump straight to a literal void, a blank. But you're saying that's just not it.
Not it at all. That's probably the biggest misconception we need to clear up right at the start. In Buddhism, emptiness does not mean vacancy or nothingness or, the absence of conscious experience. It's not something that exists on its own, like finding an empty box.
Okay.
Think about it like this, maybe. You don't find wetness just floating around by itself, do you? Separate from something that is wet.
No, of course not. It's a quality of water or a towel or something.
Exactly. Wetness is a quality. And similarly, emptiness is a property, a characteristic of things that appear in the world. You find it within your conscious experience of things.
Ah, okay. So it's a quality of existence, not some kind of lack of existence. That's a really key difference.
Huge difference. The simplest way to maybe frame it is, emptiness means that the things of this world, and that includes ourselves, our own sense of self, aren't truly solid or fixed or substantial in the way we usually assume.
They don't have this independent, standalone reality.
Precisely. No inherent, unchanging existence.
Why is it so central? What's its ultimate purpose for us, living our lives today?
The main purpose really is liberation. Specifically, liberation from suffering, from dukkha. Understanding emptiness, truly getting it, brings this incredible freedom to how you experience the world day to day.
How does it do that?
By directly challenging our most basic, often totally unexamined assumptions, like this deep-seated habit we have of seeing ourselves and the world around us as solid, fixed things. We don't even notice it's an assumption most of the time.
That makes a lot of sense. We do. We cling to things, don't we? A job, a relationship, an identity, even just an opinion, hoping it'll give us some kind of security.
Exactly. We grasp for that solid ground. But the reality is, everything is in flux. Now, just seeing impermanence, clearly seeing that things change, that already helps undermine clinging, right? Because you know it won't last.
Sure.
But emptiness goes a step further and says, look closer. There wasn't anything truly solid there to grab onto in the first place. Change is happening so constantly, so universally, that finding some stable thing is impossible.
So what we cling to is more like a memory or an idea of the thing.
Precisely. You can only really cling to the memory or the concept of something fleeting. Recognizing this mistake, seeing that things look solid but fundamentally aren't, that's the key to letting go of the struggle, the suffering. And this isn't about just, stopping your thoughts or zoning out. No, it's a very skillful use of thinking, of investigation, of exploring through practice to actually cultivate liberation. And interestingly, realizing this emptiness often naturally leads to more compassion and ethical awareness too.
How so?
Because you start to see the deep interconnectedness. The boundaries we draw seem less real. It fosters a real care for others, seeing that their well-being is tied up with yours.
Okay, this is where I think it gets really interesting, but maybe also challenging. How do we start to actually see this emptiness in our coffee cup, in the traffic, in ourselves? It still feels a bit abstract.
It does initially. Analogies can really help here. Think of the classic ship of Theseus puzzle. Or maybe even simpler, just a chariot.
Okay, a chariot.
Give it a name, just like we name things desk, tree, pizza. But what is the chariot, really? It's just a collection of parts, right? Wheels, axles, seat, yoke. Materials and events coming together for a time, and then they'll change or fall apart.
So the chariot, it's kind of a convenient label, a handy illusion.
You could say that, a conventional designation. If you take the chariot apart piece by piece, where does the chariot go? Is it in the wheel? The axle? No single part is the chariot. And even all the parts piled up aren't the chariots until they're assembled in a certain way.
So it exists conventionally, functionally, but not independently. It doesn't have chariotness built into its wood.
Exactly. It doesn't possess an inherent independent essence of chariot.
Yeah.
Now, the really radical step is to apply this same logic to ourselves.
Uh-oh.
We have this strong habit, right? Thinking of ourselves as this single, solid me, separate from everything else. But look closely. What are you made of?
Well, organs, bones, blood, thoughts, feelings, memories.
Right. Constantly changing parts and processes. Cells dying and being replaced, thoughts arising and passing, feelings shifting. Can you find any single one of those things and say, that is the real permanent me?
No, I guess not. Each part is dependent on other parts, and they're all changing.
Exactly. So you, like the chariot, are an ongoing process, a dynamic interplay, empty of a separate, fixed, inherent self.
Wait, does that mean when I stub my toe, it's not really my toe, just a collection of cells having a painful event? That feels weird.
I'll chuckle slightly. It does feel weird. It's the radical reframe. Doesn't mean the pain isn't real, but the interpretation of a solid me owning that toe and that pain, that's where the emptiness insight comes in.
But how does this coming together process actually work on a deeper, maybe more systematic level in Buddhist thought? What does that tell us?
Right. This brings us to a really fundamental doctrine shared by basically all schools of Buddhism. It's called Pratityasamutpada. Pratityasamutpada, often translated as dependent origination or dependent arising.
Okay. What's the core idea?
The core principle is actually stunningly simple, yet incredibly profound. It's often stated as, if this exists, that exists. If this ceases to exist, that also ceases to exist.
Simple, but deep. What does it mean in practice?
It means that all phenomena, everything we experience, physical or mental, arise only in dependence upon other phenomena. Nothing pops into existence out of nowhere by itself. There's no ultimate first cause in this view. Everything arises dependent on conditions, which themselves arose from other conditions.
So it's like an infinite web of interconnected causes and effects.
Pretty much. And this isn't just about how things come into being, like cause and effect in a simple linear way. It's about the very nature of existence itself.
How so?
Well, ontologically speaking, about existence, it means everything arises from other things. Epistemologically speaking, about knowledge and reality, it means there are no permanent, stable things to know in an ultimate sense. Because everything is dependently originated, nothing is permanent that's anicca, and nothing has any fixed, independent self-nature or essence that's anatta. All phenomena lack inherent essence.
Okay, so it covers existence, knowledge. Does it apply psychologically too?
Absolutely. Phenomenologically or psychologically, dependent origination explains how our minds work, how suffering, craving, and our sense of self arise based on conditions, how different mental states condition each other in a chain reaction. Seeing this chain helps us break it.
And this understanding, this dependent origination, is sometimes called the middle way.
Yes, exactly. Because it avoids philosophical extremes. It rejects the idea that everything is ultimately one single substance, like monism, and it rejects the idea that everything is totally separate and distinct, like radical pluralism. Instead, it presents reality as this dynamic flux, this constant process. It's often said Buddhism sees a world of verbs, not nouns.
A world of verbs, not nouns. I like that. You mentioned Nagarjuna before. How did he use this idea of dependent arising to really push the understanding of emptiness?
Nagarjuna. He was brilliant, a real reformer. He saw that even within Buddhism, some schools were starting to develop subtle ideas about things having some kind of fixed essence, a svabhava.
Even Buddhists were falling back into thinking things are solid.
It's a very deep habit. So Nagarjuna used the Buddha's own logic, this kind of sharp analytical questioning, to dismantle any idea of inherent existence, svabhava. His radical point was this: change itself is only possible because things are empty of fixed essence.
Wait, say that again. Emptiness makes change possible?
Yes. Think about it. If you, or anything, had a truly fixed, eternal, unchanging essence, how could you possibly change? How could you learn, grow, age, die, be reborn in the Buddhist sense, suffer, or even become enlightened? If things were truly solid, they'd be stuck forever.
Wow. Okay, so emptiness isn't denying reality. It's explaining how reality can even be dynamic.
Precisely. Emptiness is the precondition for dynamism, for life, for transformation. It's the ultimate statement of possibility. And this led him to that really famous, maybe startling statement you mentioned earlier about samsara and nirvana.
Right, that there's not the slightest distinction between them. That still sounds paradoxical. Can you unpack that a bit more?
Right.
How can the world of suffering be the same as liberation?
It sounds paradoxical because we usually picture them as two different places or two totally separate states of being. Samsara, bad, nirvana, good, good. But Nagarjuna is saying, no, look deeper. They aren't fundamentally different realities. They're different ways of experiencing the same reality of interdependence, of dependent origination.
Okay.
Samsara is what you experience when you relate to this interdependent world, through ignorance and clinging, grasping at things as if they were solid and permanent, leading to frustration and suffering. Nirvana is what you experience when you relate to that exact same interdependent world, but with wisdom, seeing things as empty of inherent existence, which leads to freedom and peace.
So it's not about escaping the world, but changing your perception of the world.
Exactly. There are alternative outcomes or potentials within the very same interconnected nexus. One path within interdependence leads to suffering, the other leads to peace. It highlights that clinging offers no guarantees, but also that change and liberation are always possible right here. It's truly revolutionary.
That is powerful. Okay, let's bring this right down to our most personal experience, our own sense of self. This feels like the ultimate challenge, maybe? How does emptiness apply here?
It absolutely is the core challenge, and where the practice gets very deep and personal. When we talk about self, it's not just our thoughts or personality. There's also what we can call the self-sense, that felt experience of being a self emotionally, physically.
The feeling of meanness?
Yeah, that felt sense. And the key insight is that this self-sense isn't fixed either. It exists on a spectrum. Think about how you feel when you're really angry or scared. Doesn't the sense of me feel quite tight, contracted, solid?
Definitely, like a hard knot.
Right. And then maybe in moments of deep calm or flow or meditation, doesn't it feel more spacious, less defined, maybe even expanded?
Yeah, much lighter, less solid.
So recognizing that this felt sense of self changes, that it's dependent on conditions like our emotional state or mental clarity, is a huge step toward seeing its emptiness. It's not a fixed entity.
So we can actually watch ourself changing. How do meditation practices help with that directly?
Well, many Buddhist practices involve looking closely at the components we usually mistake for a solid self. Meditation involves observing these moment by moment.
And what do you see when you observe them?
You see, they are constantly arising and passing away. The body changes, sensations come and go, perceptions shift, thoughts pop up and dissolve, consciousness flickers between objects. You search for a permanent manager or owner behind it all, and you can't find one. None of these aggregates, alone or together, constitutes a permanent, independent self.
So you use direct observation to deconstruct the illusion of solidity.
Exactly.
And this insight, this seeing through the self, does it stop there? Or does it keep going deeper, challenging even more fundamental ideas?
Oh, it keeps going much deeper. As the insight matures, you start to realize that even concepts we take as fundamental realities like awareness itself, perception, even time, are also empty of inherent existence.
Wow, even awareness. How can awareness be empty?
It's realized that awareness doesn't exist independently on its own. It always arises in dependence on an object of awareness and the sense faculty involved as part of the interdependent web. Time, too, is seen not as an objective container, but as a conceptual construct arising from the experience of change. They're all interdependent, mind-dependent constructions, ultimately.
That's mind-bending. So what happens when someone truly realizes this deep emptiness?
It's described as a profound liberation, a fundamental shift in perception. Appearances don't necessarily vanish, but they are seen differently, maybe as more magical, luminous, pure, less solid and graspable. Nirvana, then, isn't seen as stopping experience, but as realizing the empty nature of experience.
So we've really journeyed today from thinking emptiness means just, nothing, a void, all the way to seeing it as this fundamental insight into the interconnected, dynamic, impermanent, and essenceless nature of absolutely everything, including ourselves. If you are interested in going deeper and really working with these ideas,
There's one teacher and author whose work is particularly remarkable in making these profound ideas accessible and practical. That's Rob Burbia.
yes, Rob Burbia. His book, Seeing That Freeze.
Exactly. It's an extraordinary book. As the meditation teacher Joseph Goldstein notes, Burbia had this incredible skill for guiding people, blending deep philosophical exploration with very practical ways to cultivate these insights in meditation and daily life.
Making it really a companion for the journey.
A lifelong companion, absolutely. It really illuminates emptiness as this key transformative insight. Highly recommended if this conversation has resonated with you.
Fantastic recommendation. Well, thank you for joining us on this, well, rather mind-expanding deep dive today.
My pleasure. It's a endlessly fascinating topic.
Indeed. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and as always, keep an open mind.